Okay, there's kind of 3 points here, so I'd like to say first of all. And one is a genuine thanks to the NY. I'm going to lean back a bit because I can hear a bit of an echo here. And a genuine thanks for having justice in this space, and you'll get why I say this later on. So it's one, a genuine thank you for having children that are in and around the justice system in this space. Number 2, it's about somebody asked me a question. What is it we need for children in and around the justice system? It was somebody who was sat near to me talking to me earlier on, and I said what we need to do is we need to treat all children as children, regardless of whether or not they are in the justice system. And then finally, Jenny actually stole a bit of my thunder, Jenny Adamson, when she was talking about the vision for young people. We need to ensure that we are not deciding for young people what they should be, but about giving them those opportunities. And there was a film I saw yesterday about a chap called Don Shirley. I don't know whether or not you know him, but he's a very well-known black male classical pianist from America, and he came to the fore in the 1950s and 60s, and he was told by all around him that black kids don't do classical pianist stuff. Now, how many times are we saying to children what they should and shouldn't be for all sorts of different reasons? Now, he went on to be a success, and that was quite, from what I can see, to do with his determination. But you've got people in this room who can actually support and influence. So don't put our assumptions on children and where they should be. And I'll bring those points out in a little bit more detail. In Youth Work Week, which is quite rightly themed about youth work in every place and space, I'd like to pay tribute to the achievements of youth work and also stress the need for youth work, particularly after COVID and post-COVID. Youth work is happening in every place and space, including hospitals, schools, outdoors, and youth justice settings and more, as you've already heard. There's real opportunity for youth work in places and spaces for where young people are at. 85% of young people's time is spent outside of school. What's been achieved? Around 2 million young people in England are engaged with youth services at least once a week. Most youth provision is place-based and focused on delivering support within specific communities and neighbourhood. Youth workers build trusted relationships and underline trusted relationships with young people, and youth work has proven to have positive impacts on young people's mental health, social, emotional skills and development. 89% of young people that attend youth centres say it made a positive difference to their lives, and we've strongly heard that today. Studies show that youth work delivers a tangible return on investment. What about wider achievements? The Youth Justice Board and the Ministry of Justice recently revealed that around 8,000 children enter the criminal justice system for the first time, but this is over 100,000 less than when we were looking back in 2006, where the highest first-time entrants were recorded. Custodial sentences are now seen as equally impressive and have reduced from over 7,000 to just under 500 young people in over 20 years. Now, that's not a message for us to relax, but I think the messages that I'd like to get across by highlighting that is I believe that the right collaborations have played a significant part in keeping children and young people out of the justice system and preventing crime and safer communities. Children having good, trusting relationships is also a critical part of children and young people having positive futures. At the Youth Justice Board, our vision for a child-first justice system, a youth justice system that sees children as children, treats them fairly and helps them to build on their strengths so that they can make a constructive contribution to society. This will prevent offending and create safer communities with fewer victims. Now, the important link between youth work and youth justice. We're both focused on positive outcomes for children, seeing children as children and not mini-adults. It's critical that those involved in youth work and those involved in the justice world see the benefits for children and society if we are going to increase the opportunities for us to work together on a shared vision. Now, me, if I can say, there's some things I'd ask that we look for in the future, and that's a full and unequivocal acceptance of the evidence. So the work that we do is evidence-based. Sometimes there is this thing where we think, oh, this is going to be a good solution. Please follow the evidence. A focus on continued early intervention and supporting evidence-based prevention and diversion. Real alternatives to custody. The secure schools, and it's good to see that somebody's here from Oasis. Diversity of thought and experience through our workforce, and a smarter use of technology, and a sector that embraces and is ready for the impact of artificial intelligence on both us and the children that we support. Children must of course take responsibility for their actions and learn and grow, but we should not face a lifetime, they should not face a lifetime of stigma. We must change the lifelong judgment that is made about the character of children who commit crime, in particular for black children who are so often wrongly treated as adults. I could go on for a long time about my hopes for the system, but I think it's best to leave it with those priorities. You in this room are the leaders who I'm asking to, and I feel sure I have your support to see all children as children and champion a focus on positive outcomes for children. Thank you. Right. What I'd like to do now is rejig the order, and I have prepared, and we've got an excellent panel of speakers here. I'm going to start off with our youth representative first, but it doesn't mean that it gets progressively older as I move on to the other people. But I would like to start off with our panellists. Palumi, a young representative from UK Youth. I know you're a passionate advocate for youth work and have even worked with youth offending teams in your professional career. It'd be great to hear about your lived experience of youth work, including the value, impact, engaging with youth work, and what impact it's had on your journey. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, because I think it's really important to have young people in these spaces, so I'm really appreciative of that. And I guess my experience started as well because when I left uni, I got a job at a charity, and then it was really random how I got the job, by the way. I saw someone with a lanyard, I approached them, I said I'd get to work with the I Will movement, which is the UK Youth, and I'd done some other work, and I was like, oh, would it be okay for me to work to get a job there? And I was a voice worker, which was basically getting young people's feedback about the service that the charity offers, and using that feedback to make the service better. One of the pieces of work was with the youth offending team. This is in Greater Manchester, where I'm from. And so what we did was, me and my colleague, we proposed some questionnaires, we did some research. We did a pilot with one young person that went through the art, and what we found was that because of the barriers that the youth worker were facing, we couldn't necessarily meet the young people, and this is seen with because of the cost of living crisis, because youth workers are so disenfranchised. Really, they're not really galvanized to want to be able to provide the work for the young people in the best way possible. More and more youth workers are leaving, and I think that just shows in the way in which they when we then talk to the young people were so disconnected from their youth workers, which just showed the issue at hand. And just looking more broadly and more widely within youth work, why youth work is so important, because there's a case going on in Manchester called the Manchester 10 case, and for some people that don't know about it, it's some young people who are black and who are still in jail. They did the appeal on Friday actually, but it got adjourned. The reason why I bring that up is because I think now looking at hindsight, we can always ask questions. What if this case was treated more like a conversation? What if the police didn't get involved? What if we had a youth worker that talked to young people instead of taking it to the police? I think we should always use hindsight to help the next generation and to help young people who are in situations like they were found in. And I just hope and pray that they are helped. And my last point is, I think over the last couple of months, we've seen a rise in knife crime specifically with young boys being the perpetrators. We've seen this in Croydon and we saw this in Manchester as well. I think there needs to be a conversation around what that means and why young boys are perpetuating such crimes, because I think there needs to be a conversation around what young men think about rejection, what they think about women, what they think about themselves, because what we are finding is, when we talk about place and space, but in both cases, in Manchester and London, the reason why the knife crime happened, the attack happened, was due to rejection. So, that was in London and that was in Manchester. So they're two different spaces, but the same action happened because of the same reason. So there needs to be conversations, projects with young boys specifically about how they view themselves. And yeah, that's my
Philip Palumi, I think it's an excellent challenge there for us already, that big question around why. How often do we ask why when we see what's happening with children and young people, when we see certain behaviour being exhibited? How many missed opportunities are there as a result of that, because we react to the behaviour rather than asking why? And that what if question as well, I think was absolutely excellent, so I took that out for me, and also the importance of the relationship between youth work and the young person. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to move over to Liv Peck, Director of the Violence Reduction Unit. London's VRU is a team of specialists who bring together people from across London to better understand the why question, why violence happens, and to take action to prevent it now in a long-term measure. The mantra, violence is preventable, not inevitable, is something I've heard you say many a time. Over to you, Liv.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to speak today. As you said, Keith, the London Violence Reduction Unit was set up by the Mayor about 4.5 years ago with a very explicit mandate to really focus on prevention in that space. And one of the first things that we did, and this speaks to your earlier point, was to make sure that we set up a group of young people that we worked consistently with and developed our strategy of how we were going to try and prevent violence from occurring. And I think that's really important, putting young people at the centre of things. You know, what is relevant to a young person, not only in terms of activities, but what are the kind of things that are making them feel incredibly, bleak, or indeed, perhaps in some cases, encouraging them to get more involved in violence. And one of the points that hasn't yet come out, but I do think is fundamental, is about how we talk about it. So serious youth violence is not a phrase that really young people are particularly keen on, and why should it be? This is a violence affecting young people, and that therefore comes to your point around perpetrators and victims, which in a way are of course profound in the consequences of behaviour, but actually in terms of how we talk about young people and how we involve young people is incredibly divisive in terms of the way then we, I think, treat and look at young people. So that was a key component of the way we've looked at things, and we've developed a young people strategy that starts right the way in early years and thinks about those key transition points, those key moments where an intervention may well help a young person and really make sure they are able to live a fulfilled life rather than a life that could take them in a much more difficult direction. You mentioned that we are a group of a multidisciplinary team, and we do have indeed youth workers who are part of that team, and I'm really pleased that Chloe in the back of the room is here with us today and leads on a lot of this work. We also made sure that we have a youth practitioners board that are people who are working like yourselves, day in, day out with young people and can advise our work, because I think hearing that professional voice and that professional challenge consistently is also a key part of how we move forward. I'm conscious that you've been spoken to a lot. I'm sure you've heard a lot of things, so I'm going to touch on 3 points only. And I want to start with a story that motivates me, because it was an experience I had about 18 months ago. I went along to the Holborn police station and met a young man there who spoke to me about how his life was going in one direction. A catastrophic event happened, and he very rapidly found himself excluded from school, flirting with membership of gangs, and was at that point in a custody suite. And what he found was the key thing for him was to be able to sit alongside a youth worker in a custody suite who was able to reach that hand of friendship, was able to not be part of the institution that he was in and found baffling and he was distrustful of, and was able to offer some hope. And the amazing thing for me about that was that he actually, having gone from a position of being excluded, actually was now talking from a position of attending university. And that power of intervention seems to me, in that place, in that setting, was very, very profound. That was one scheme that we invest money and time in, called Engage, which is working with youth workers in custody suites. And we have a similar scheme that we invest in called Divert, which is for 17 to 25-year-olds. And it seems to me reaching those young people at that critical moment where their life could very easily go into the criminal justice system is so important. And that is also important in the context of hospital youth work, where Oasis and St Giles and Red Thread are also youth workers at a place where victims and perpetrators, to use that language, come in. But it's a profound moment for reflection. And one of the things that really struck me about that visit was also that before we met the young man, we were put in a police cell. And you can see why that moment might make you want to think of a different way forward, in the same way as maybe laying in a hospital bed and thinking that was a very near miss may do the same. So more investment in those critical points at which we could make a difference is important, and it's great to hear Janet say that is something that the Labour Party is now committed to. I think the second point is we're in the business of prevention, and we don't want to be leaving it to that moment. 50% of the young people broadly across all these schemes, I'm sure there are people who've got more of the detailed statistics out there, but broadly 50% of the young people, either in the hospital-based scheme or in the custody suite, take up that opportunity to talk to someone, and then in turn 50% of that 50%, so i.e. 25% overall, find a different route, which is really positive. But we want to be doing it much more upstream. I know you've heard all about that, but I just want to plug the importance of that being targeted. Targeted in terms of addressing your point around how are we talking about and with women and young men about that sort of gender relationship, and what are the concerns, how can we break down that, how can we think about that conflict resolution. We need to be doing it on a targeted level geographically. We have a scheme called My Ends, which is supporting youth workers working with young people on a very, very place-based perspective. An area in Haringey, an area in Lambeth, 8 neighbourhoods across London. That also seems to me to be very important. And also in pupil referral units, which again was great to hear that pledge, making sure that there is a mentor one-to-one for those young people who, as we know, are therefore unfortunately much more likely to get caught up in violence. The Mayor has boosted not only the investment we've got in that vital piece of youth work, but also in championing, along with other organisations and councils, the idea of 100,000 young people being reached through a mentor. That whole idea of that relationship and the power of that relationship. But I think my sort of third point, and the point I want to finish on, is that we kind of need to zoom out as well. So I think you zoom in on the power of the individual, the power of the relationship, absolutely the essence of good quality mentoring, the essence of good quality youth work, the power to change things genuinely, and I know you've all seen that, and certainly I've been privileged to see that as well. But it's got to be structural as well. We look at poverty, alienation, deprivation as drivers of young people, in fact all of us, getting involved in violence. We can't do anything about the poverty as, sitting in London with a smallish budget. The Mayor has done his part by offering free school meals, but there's a whole lot of other stuff that needs to be done. Alienation, again, it's not surprising, is it, if you're a young person and you're told you're not wanted at school for whatever reason, and sometimes that has to be the only response. I appreciate that, but you are going to feel pretty alienated from your society. All of that, it seems to me, it requires a much more long-term strategic structural package of investment that we've really got to hope comes forward, because it's about valuing, it's putting more than a price on things, isn't it? It's valuing the essence of why we kind of get on as a society, and that's really what we need to see, I think, in terms of reducing violence. So that, yes, is money, but it's investment of time, and it's talking about the really important role that relationships plays and that youth work embodies. Thank you.
Luke, thank you very much. I'm getting signals that we need to kind of keep us on track here as well. But I just wanted to say that I was so pleased to hear you talk about serious youth violence and that term and how stigmatising that term can be. So I think the thing that we need to be looking at is violence and serious violence and what we're doing around that. There were some other points I'd like to bring out, but we will shift on. I'm going to move on to Jess now to my right, who's the Chief Exec of Kinetic Youth. Kinetic Youth is a charity that uses youth work methodologies to support young people involved in, or who are more likely to be involved in the youth justice system. Just wanted to hear your reflections and thoughts.
Thank you. Okay, so I've been tasked with answering the question around how youth work can help across youth justice in general, and my career in youth work specialised in youth justice about 15 years ago, so I've been championing youth work in any place for a very, very long time, so it's nice to get it on the agenda. To bring it to more recent times, I think it was in March this year, I was at the YJB's Young Leaders Summit, I think it was called, I can't remember that. And there was a panel of speakers all talking about the partners that support youth justice. There was someone there from health, there was someone there from education, there was someone there from partnerships, I think, and this kind of multidisciplinary approach. And I listened to everybody talking, and I stood up and asked a question about 20 minutes later as to where was youth work, why wasn't it mentioned. Now, what I did actually was got a really fantastic response, which I wasn't expecting and certainly wouldn't have got 10 years ago. And the response talked about youth work and labelled all the things that I'm going to talk about. It just didn't call it youth work. And so when we talk about how important it is to have youth work within youth justice, we're talking about two really fundamental principles that I think people talk about, and it goes back to what Guy from Oasis was talking about, sorry, I forget your name, about that language and understanding that language. Essentially, what the youth justice system needs is individuals and professionals who can work with a young person, independent from them, and build that trusted relationship. And that's essentially what youth work is and does. Equally, how we sell that to the Youth Justice Service is because youth justice workers have a statutory obligation. Every single one of them has a statutory obligation, like teachers and the requirements that they have to fulfil. Youth workers' obligation, whether we consider it should or shouldn't be statutory, is about supporting young people's engagement within all of those things. Whatever life is that young people want to engage in or need to engage in, if they have barriers to that engagement, well, that's why we're there. That's youth work. That's what we do. And I think what's really interesting is that over the years we have seen how it is becoming more and more recognised as something massively important, but it isn't necessarily always recognised as youth work. But it's fantastic to hear that here it is. And I think sometimes having some of the strategic youth work people, like from the National Youth Agency and other huge organisations, working at that strategic level with the Youth Justice Board is, and everybody in youth justice really is hugely important. But I think the other half of my question was about the challenges that young people have. Sorry, I'm talking quickly. We've just been hurried up. I think it's really important to remember that our youth justice system for children is just the system for adults for children. It isn't any different. And there are times when we are fighting and we are making changes, and it's definitely different to what it was. But I think it's really important that we remember that. And if you're asking me what the biggest challenge for a young person in the youth justice system is, it is that. Secondary, it is also the fact that we don't call them children. They are not children. They are criminals. They are young people who've done something bad. Well, let's go 2 steps back, because I'm sure there are findings from research, that evidence that actually whatever you're punishing that child for, if an adult had done something different in the lead up to that event, that child would not have done what they did, and therefore it would not result in the child being punished. Sorry, I'm particularly passionate about some of this, passionate together. So I think the huge challenge for us in the youth justice system is about recognising the place of youth work, really valuing it, and getting the funding behind it so that we can get it in place. I'm going to leave you with an example of the work that we do in Kinetic to bring you full circle to why youth work is really important in youth justice. Kinetic primarily delivers youth work within the secure estate, and that comes with a multitude of challenges similar to the ones delivering within education, but certainly more intense because of the nature of the environment. Now, as you probably all know, and really, really sadly, there are huge numbers of incidents of violence within youth custody that these young people are involved in and are victims of, and is absolutely harrowing. All the statistics you got from the number of young people in custody over the years and so on and so forth. So Kinetic Youth have been delivering now in youth custody, delivering youth work in the secure estate for 12 years, I think, something like that. And we have only ever had one incident of a minor incident of violence with a young person, and that's in any of our spaces in the secure estate. It's within any of the delivery within the secure estate, and that for me is hugely telling about why youth work needs to be in every space and in every place that young people are.
Thank you, and thank you for highlighting some of the possibilities for youth work is seen as the kind of core of the answer, or a key part of the answer. And now I'd like to move on to Alex, who's Head of Knowledge at the National Youth Agency. I know that, Alex, you've just launched the NY's New Youth Report, the social cost of youth work cuts, preventing youth offending through youth work. It'd be great to hear your reflections.
Great. Thank you, Keith. I'm going to be really brief because I know we're up against it. But I just wanted to flag up a few things, really. And I was interested in the talk about perpetrators and victims, just because on the train this morning I was reading some new research which had found that almost half of young people asked in one of the biggest youth surveys ever said that they were impacted by violence or the fear of violence in their day-to-day lives, which I thought was quite staggering and pretty horrific. I'm not going to go into the details of what we found, particularly in our research, because most of our fund has been stolen anyway throughout the course of the day. But it's quite interesting to see that how linked it is to how youth justice is linked to health, to schools, and to the other aspects of youth provision. I mean, it was, again, in the same research I found, it said that 20% of young people skip school due to fear of violence, which I thought was quite frightening as well, actually. But our research found, that there is clear evidence that reductions in funding for youth provision and the closure of youth centres lead to an increase in crime rates for some young people. Now, that might, for some of you, you'll be rolling your eyes, or you might even be thinking, no, shit, Sherlock. But it's these things have been proven now, and Keith, you talk very much about evidence base, and we need to be stronger in our evidence base. And so the work of the APPG into knife crime, the work that we had support from the University of Warwick, from a student there who carried out research into the effect of cuts in London boroughs and closures of youth services, and it shows that there's I think there's a 10% increase in crime for young people, of certain young people in those areas where youth provision is no longer. It's just an open goal, really. And so I think it's frightening when you look at all the statistics. I think it's frightening when you look at the budget cuts across youth services. I think it's frightening when you look at the open access provision, the kind of bread and butter of youth work is being disproportionately hit over the last 10 years within that. And I think we need to be able to be stronger. We need to be able to be more evidence-based in terms of demonstrating the impact of our work. And I'd advise all of you to read our research. You know, we do make a number of recommendations. You know, first of all, we ask government to give us back our billion pounds that they took from us over the last decade. But you know, we need to work together. The youth work sector, you know, there are inherent tensions sometimes between youth work practice and practice in the youth justice sector, but we need to be able to work together in a more integrated way. And I think we need to be encouraging cross-sector workforce development by prioritising activities that kind of work on that, challenge those misconceptions and misunderstandings. And I think we need to really, I wouldn't say this, I would only say this because I'm a researcher, so that it's kind of in my blood, but we need to prioritise more youth work research into the impact and to be able to, you know, Lee said earlier that everything's data driven now, and we need to be able to demonstrate that to the powers that be. No, stop now.
Right, lovely. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for looking at you so intently. I'm trying to make sure that everybody gets heard as well. I suppose the key thing there is around following the evidence and using the evidence. How much are we actually using the evidence in order to impact on change? And finally, and definitely not least, is Dr. Marcellus Baz, BEM, who's founder and CEO of Switch Up, supporting the most disadvantaged communities affected by crime and violence in Nottingham. Marcellus, it'd be good to hear your reflections on Switch Up and the impact youth work has on children's lives and young people.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to express my gratitude for being here and being able to have the platform to speak to you incredible people. Switch Up was designed and founded by myself because of my own personal challenges of being involved in the criminal justice system, and to be able to first-hand see the trauma that can go through your community, through friends and people that you know very closely being killed, murdered through youth violence. And myself, you know, I was stabbed and my heart stopped, and I can remember, you know, coming back and the doctor saying, well, you was dead for a minute. And that really made you start to look at things from a different perspective. And what I did then was to start to look at dissecting my own trauma, my own lived experience, and the experiences of people that are not here anymore, and people that, you know, are in prison, to really find out what is it that was missing, you know, what kind of changed the trajectory of people's lives. And it was 5 key areas that I found. And the first one is mentoring, that father figure, that guidance, that direction. We didn't have, you know, we needed that. And we know that a lot of young people need that today. The second area was education. You know, I was dyslexic. A lot of people in my community were struggling with conventional school environments. We needed something that was different. We provide unconventional environments with bespoke education packages that are designed around that individual young person and their learning styles. The third thing is therapy and counselling. Counselling and therapy is absolutely important that we provide that to young people, because if they're seeing trauma, we need to help them to be able to heal. We need to help them to be able to get resilience and coping mechanisms so that they don't relapse and they don't go backwards. The fourth thing is physical activity. For me, that was a great way of self-medicating in a positive environment, a safe environment. Your environment is key, because if you look at your environment, that influences your feelings influences your thoughts, and your thoughts influence your actions. So for me, making sure that, you know, that physical activity helped me develop a growth mindset. It does for plenty of young people we work today. Transferable disciplines, self-esteem and confidence. And the fifth pillar that we have is employability support, to look at them soft skills that are needed to be able to help and support and transition young people into the world of work. And we work with around 49 businesses that support that through ESG and social corporate responsibility to deliver them employability skills, but also to open opportunities for young people to then get apprenticeships, traineeships, work experience, and help them to become, full-time into full-time employment. Give them a rod, give them rather than giving them a fish, we give them a rod to be able to help them become law-abiding, tax-paying citizens that are contributing back into the community. And, Quincy was one of those young people that we seen earlier today. He was homeless, he was suffering with mental health. Today, he's confident and he's in a full-time job. That's what we do. The model that we have got at the minute, it works. It works because we're working in collaboration in a multi-agency environment with the private sector and the public sector. The public sector profiling young people and families and referring them in. And then we look at when we look at the referrals coming through, we look at 5 key areas. The first one is your hierarchy of needs. Have they got food? How do they feel safe? Have they got shelter? Have they got someone to talk to? The second is their beliefs and perceptions. If they believe that their girlfriend, they can beat their girlfriend up because they've seen their mum getting beaten up, or they can deal with violence by stabbing somebody because they've got an altercation, we need to challenge them beliefs and perceptions. The third is therapy and support. The fourth is skills and training. And the fifth is employment and further education. There can't be employment and further education if any of the other factors are sorted. So it's important that we look at the root causes rather than the symptoms.
Thank you. Marcellus, thank you. And I think the thing for me, what you brought out there quite clearly, is to kind of look at that context around the child and young person in relation to thinking how it is that we work with young people. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got time, for questions, but it was fantastic to hear from our speakers. So thank you very much for your reflections. And I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you, and I'm sorry.